My name is Mia. I'm 28 years old, living in Ohio with my husband, Ethan. I'm 7 months pregnant with our first child, the baby I've been longing for every single day. But that excitement has been smothered by one woman who inserts herself into every corner of my life, my mother-in-law, Caroline. I still remember that morning when sunlight spilled across the shiny tile floor of our kitchen. I set a cup of coffee in front of Ethan. Remember, today we have the appointment with Dr. Lewis for the routine checkup, I said, my hand resting on my belly. Ethan looked up, his eyes already carrying hesitation. Mom wants us to switch doctors. She knows a famous obstetrician in Cleveland, says the equipment is more advanced. My fingers tightened. Ethan, doctor, Lewis has followed me from the beginning of this pregnancy. I trust her. But he only sighed, his tone cold. Mom knows what's best, Mia. You should listen. Just then, the doorbell rang. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Caroline walked in with her usual confidence. A dark blue dress, pearl necklace gleaming, heavy perfume trailing behind her. She glanced at my stomach and gave a thin smile. Mia, you look a little worn out. Pregnant women should know how to take better care of themselves. You're eating too many carbs, aren't you? I bit my lip, forcing myself to stay calm. I've been following the diet Dr. Lewis recommended. Caroline sniffed, disdain flickering in her eyes. Lewis? Honestly, she's not a big name. My grandchild deserves the care of the very best. I've already booked an appointment with Dr. Morgan. You just need to agree. Ethan stood beside her, silent, as if his mother's words were commands. My chest tightened. This was my child, yet every decision was being ripped away. Caroline didn't stop there. She headed straight upstairs, her heels tapping sharply against the wooden floor. I want to take another look at the nursery. I heard you picked pastel yellow? Her voice stretched with mockery. I hurried after her, my heart pounding. The little room I had poured my love into, soft yellow walls, sheer white curtains. My grandmother's wooden rocking chair was my safe place. Caroline's face twisted instantly. Oh, so bland. Babies need bright colors, pink or blue. This looks like a hospital, I answered, voice shaky but firm. Ethan and I chose this together. It feels warm. Caroline turned to her son. Ethan, what do you think? Do you really want your child growing up in a dull room like this? He avoided my gaze and nodded slightly. Mom has a point. Maybe we should change it. It felt like my chest was crushed. I had hoped Ethan would at least defend the decision we made together, but once again, he let his mother dictate. My voice rose, though I tried to keep it steady. No, this is our house. I want it to stay as an island. Caroline's smile was icy. Mia, you're stubborn. You have no experience. I raised 3 successful children. I know far more than you ever could. Don't let your emotions blind you and hurt the baby. Ethan placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice soft but cutting. Mia, stop. Don't create tension in front of Mom. I turned to him, tears welling up. Are you my husband or just her son? The air grew thick, suffocating. Caroline stood in the middle of the room, her blue eyes sharp, her face staring me. You're going against this entire family, Mia. Are you sure you want to take that path? I cradled my belly, feeling the baby shift inside me, as if sensing my turmoil. One truth hit me with clarity. Caroline didn't just want to control the nursery or which doctor I saw. She wanted to consume my entire life and the life of my unborn child. After that day, I realized Caroline didn't stop at meddling with the nursery or choosing the doctor. She began weaving an invisible net around me, tightening it every day, until I could hardly breathe. Every morning at 7 a.m., the phone rang. Caroline called, her voice dripping with fake concern. Ethan, did you have breakfast? I think Mia should drink almond milk instead of cow's milk. It's better for the baby. I sat right at the table, listening to my husband answer clearly, never once looking at me. Those calls dragged on for 15 minutes, and by the time they ended, my breakfast was cold. At first, I tried to point it out. Ethan, don't you see your mom is interfering too much? But he only sighed, sipping his coffee. She's just looking out for you. You're too sensitive. That sensitivity he spoke of slowly turned me into a shadow in my own home. Caroline showed up constantly without notice. She walked in as if the place belonged to her, carrying a list of things to fix. Change the crib, replace the air filter, even correct how I folded laundry. Ethan, instead of objecting, smiled gratefully. Mom, you're so thoughtful. Bit by bit, I felt myself being pushed out of every decision, and it didn't stop at home. The isolation grew sharper during the parties Caroline hosted at her mansion on the outskirts of Columbus. Lavish gatherings with old friends, women draped in expensive gowns, their eyes glued to my every move. That evening, Caroline pulled me toward a long table covered with lace, where everyone was raising glasses of wine. This is Mia, Ethan's wife, she introduced proudly. But instead of asking me anything, the women only looked me up and down, as if I were a side character in Caroline's story. A woman named Helen tilted her head and asked Ethan, not me, how far along is she? She looks a bit small, doesn't she? I stood right there, but no one looked at me as they asked. Ethan answered casually, 7 months, then turned to smile at his mother. Another chimed in. Caroline's grandchild will surely be smart, it runs in her family. Mia must feel so lucky to marry into this family. Laughter broke out, and I felt my ears burn. I clenched my fists, wanting to speak up, but when I looked at Ethan, he stayed silent, letting me stand there like a display piece. The dinner carried on with talk of business, travel, and Caroline's children's accomplishments. No one asked me about my work, my interests, or anything about me. When one woman said, after the baby is born, Mia should focus on childcare and let Caroline handle the important matters, the whole table laughed in agreement. I swallowed my humiliation, holding back tears. On the way home, I gathered the courage to say, didn't you see? They humiliated me right in front of you. They spoke as if I didn't exist. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then replied flatly, you're too sensitive. Everyone just wants the best for you and the baby. Those words cut deeper than a knife. In the days that followed, Caroline brought those same friends to our house. They settled onto my couch like it was theirs, commenting on how the living room needed a chandelier, how the kitchen cabinets should be replaced. I stood there, hand on my belly, listening to every cold remark. Caroline smiled, nodding along, while Ethan stood beside her, occasionally agreeing. I began to fear even ordinary mornings. Fear of the doorbell announcing Caroline, fear of her friends' scrutinizing eyes, fear of my husband's silence. I was trapped in a prison with no bars, but no way out. One night, after yet another party at Caroline's, I broke down in the car. Ethan, I can't take this anymore. Don't you see I've become invisible? Don't you see I'm losing my voice in my own life? He kept his eyes on the road, his tone steady. Mom sacrificed her whole life for this family. You should be grateful instead of resisting. I turned toward the window, tears streaming down my face. Outside, the streetlights blurred past, fading behind us just like me, fading away from the world of the man I once trusted. I realized then Caroline didn't just want control. She wanted to erase me, piece by piece, until I became nothing more than a quiet shadow inside the Campbell family. And Ethan, the man who should have been my support, was the one clearing the path for her to do it. I entered the 37th week of my pregnancy, my body heavy, sleepless, and constantly exhausted. Caroline still came to the house every day, carrying her so-called non-negotiable advice, while Ethan quietly stood by her side. I forced myself to endure, swallowing every bit of resentment, only praying for the day I could finally hold my baby. That night, the Ohio sky was dark and heavy, the cold wind whistling through the cracks of the door. I was tidying up the living room when the first sharp pain ripped through my belly, dropping me to my knees. I clung to the chair, gasping. The pain lasted over a minute, intense and abnormal. I knew this was no false contraction. The baby was coming. Panicked, I cried out, "Ethan, it hurts so bad we have to go to the hospital now." He walked out of his office, his face indifferent. "Are you sure? It might just be a false alarm." My voice cracked as I snapped, "No, I'm sure. The baby's coming." Just then, the doorbell rang. Caroline appeared in a long coat, as calm as ever. She looked at me, doubled over on the floor, then coolly turned to her son. "Your wife seems hysterical. Women often think labor starts early." I clutched my belly, pleading, "Please take me to the hospital. The baby's in danger." Caroline tilted her head, a thin smile spreading. "Mia, first labors usually last many hours. You're far from it. Instead of panicking, you should listen to someone with experience." Shaking, I struggled to my feet. "No, I need to go now. The contractions are too close together." I grabbed my phone to call an ambulance, but Caroline suddenly snatched it away. "Enough! You're causing a scene and making Ethan worry for no reason." She set the phone on the table and told her son quietly, "Lock the door, let her rest. She'll be fine soon." I froze at the sharp click of the lock. Ethan had obeyed her. My vision blurred. Holding my belly, I stammered, You really just did that? Our baby could be in danger. Ethan, I'm begging you." But he stood there, his eyes flickering, then growing cold. "Mom's right. You need to calm down. We don't have to rush to the hospital in the middle of the night over a few contractions." Outside, rain began to pound, wind lashing against the windows. I dragged myself to the porch, banging desperately on the glass, my voice breaking. "Please open the door. My baby can't wait." My tears mixed with the freezing rain, seeping through the cracks, each contraction tearing me apart until I nearly collapsed. Inside, Caroline and Ethan sat at the dining table. She poured herself wine, took a slow sip, and said softly, "This is a lesson, Mia. Those who don't respect the family will face the consequences." Ethan lowered his head, silent, refusing to look at me writhing on the porch. The betrayal cut to my very core. The man who once vowed to protect me for life now sat beside his mother, leaving me to endure agony alone. Each icy drop stung my face, each contraction shredded my body. I pounded the door with what little strength I had left, screaming, "Ethan, do you hear me? If anything happens to me or our baby, you'll regret it forever." No response. Only the faint clink of glasses from the kitchen, cold and distant, slicing away the last thread of trust I had left. Time crawled. I nearly blacked out from the pain, but one thought burned in my mind. I had to live. I had to save my child. When a flash of lightning lit the sky, I caught my reflection in the window, an imprisoned woman, abandoned in the very house called her home. And in that moment, I swore, if I survived this night, my life would never, ever be the same. I don't remember how long I collapsed on the porch. My body shook violently, the contractions tearing me apart. Cold rain soaked my hair and clothes, mixing with tears. Just when I thought I would black out, Caroline finally stood up and muttered, "Perhaps it's time to take her in. Otherwise, this could cause bigger trouble." Ethan rushed out, fumbling to unlock the door and lift me up. I had no strength left to resist, only hearing him mumble, "Hang on, Mia, you'll be fine." Bitterness flooded me. He had locked the door, left me to suffer, and now pretended to care. They put me in the car, Caroline in the back seat, issuing orders nonstop. "Ethan, drive slowly. Don't jolt her. She's just panicking." I clenched my teeth. hissing through contractions. Panicking? My baby is coming, you don't understand? Caroline only smiled, her gloved hand brushing my shoulder, cold as steel. At the hospital, the blinding white lights and the urgent voices of nurses and doctors made me feel like I'd escaped hell. A young nurse named Ruby rushed over, her eyes fierce with determination. Get the patient into the emergency room now. The baby's heartbeat is unstable. I heard Caroline cut in. I'm the mother-in-law. I'll stay to help. Ruby shot her a sharp look. Sorry, only the husband is allowed in. Everyone else must wait outside. Caroline froze for a moment, then forced a smile and stepped back. I caught the flicker of fury in her eyes. In the delivery room, I gripped Ruby's hand like it was my lifeline. She leaned close and whispered, "Breathe steadily, Mia. We're here. We won't let anything happen to you or the baby." Her words poured warmth into my shattered heart. Time blurred. I remember only the sweat dripping, the urgent commands, and Ruby's firm hand in mine. After a battle that felt like life or death, a cry pierced the air, loud, strong, and pure. My child had entered the world. Tears streamed down my face. I whispered hoarsely, my daughter, my daughter." Ruby carried the baby closer, murmuring, "A girl, healthy, 6 pounds 12 ounces. Congratulations, Mia." I gazed at the tiny red face, the small hands waving blindly, and my heart burst open. Every agony had suddenly been worth it. But the joy was stolen almost instantly. Before I could hold her longer, the door burst open. Caroline swept in, Ethan behind her. She rushed forward, snatching the baby from the nurse's arms, beaming. "Oh, my granddaughter, absolutely perfect." I tried to rise, my voice raw. "Give her back to me." But Caroline turned to the doctor, smiling sweetly. If it weren't for us staying calm, she would have caused chaos at home. Thankfully, I knew exactly when to bring her in. Ethan nodded along, not even looking at me. The nurses exchanged glances, but no one spoke. I was shoved into the shadows at the very moment that should have belonged to me. Caroline lifted the baby high, showing her off to relatives waiting in the hall. "Here she is, my granddaughter. I was there for every moment of this special event." Applause and praise echoed. Not a single word for me, the one who had stared death in the face to bring this child into the world. On the hospital bed, I trembled, my chest tight with rage. I felt invisible, erased from my own story. Ruby placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Don't worry, Mia. Your baby needs you most. When the time comes, take back what's yours." Her words were like a spark of fire in the darkness. I knew Caroline had crowned herself the hero, but I also knew the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. Under the harsh hospital lights, I swore silently. No matter how much she performed before others, I would never let Caroline steal my role as mother. And one day, both she and Ethan would pay the price for the nightmare they had forced me to endure. In the days after I gave birth, Caroline seemed to claim everything. She moved around the hospital like a hero who had saved me and the baby, while Ethan trailed behind her, never once listening to me. I was pushed aside, left like a useless figure on the bed. That night, as I held my daughter in my arms, I made myself a promise. One day, I would expose the truth. The chance came sooner than I expected. After we returned home, Caroline frequently visited, always carrying piles of papers. One morning, she hurried out for a charity event and left her handbag on the desk. I hadn't planned to touch it, but when the baby cried, I picked her up and accidentally knocked the bag over. Among the scattered pages, a leather-bound blue notebook fell out. My heart pounded. I immediately recognized Caroline's neat handwriting. Part of me wanted to put it back untouched, but another part pushed me forward. If I wanted to survive in this family, I had to know what they were hiding. I opened it, and each line cut into me like a blade. In that diary, Caroline outlined her long-term strategy for the Campbell family. She wrote, Mia is emotionally unstable, easy to label as unfit to raise the child. Ethan must be reminded that his mother is his true anchor. If the marriage fails, custody of the baby must go to the Campbell family. I was stunned. She had already planned to rip my daughter from me even while I was here, alive, caring for her every day. But that wasn't the worst of it. Toward the end of the notebook, Caroline carefully listed bank accounts, investment funds, and a chain of shady transactions. Shell company names, transfers routed across multiple states, even overseas. I wasn't an expert in finance, but I was smart enough to see this was evidence of something deeply corrupt. I flipped through more pages and saw Caroline had written about each family member, who was easy to control, who was a threat. Under my name, she wrote, more stubborn than expected, increase pressure, use the baby as leverage. My hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped the book. My baby stirred in my arms, her clear eyes lifting to meet mine, as if reminding me that weakness was no longer an option. I quickly tucked the diary into a secret drawer in my bedroom, replacing it with a thick book that had a similar cover. Caroline wouldn't notice right away. That afternoon, I cared for the baby while carefully reading every page I had snapped photos of on my phone. The more I read, the more I shuddered at Caroline's coldness. She didn't see me as a daughter-in-law at all, but as an obstacle to eliminate. Every ounce of her concern was nothing more than a mask for her hunger for control. When Ethan came home, I tested him. What if something happened? Do you think I'd be fit to raise our child? He froze for a moment, then frowned. Why would you even ask that? Of course you'll raise her with me, but Mom has more experience, she just wants to help. I stayed silent, choking down my fury. He had no idea his mother had already written a script to make him her pawn, and me the disposable one. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the suspicious transactions in the diary. If the government ever investigated, would Ethan get dragged in too? And how would my daughter grow up branded by a family scandal? Outside, Caroline still played the role of the perfect mother-in-law, boasting everywhere that she had rescued me and brought her granddaughter safely into the world. Meanwhile, I was painted as the weak mother who couldn't handle anything on her own. Outsiders believed her, while I carried the humiliation in silence. But now, I had a weapon. Caroline's diary didn't just expose her plan to steal my child, it contained secrets that could ruin the entire Campbell family's reputation. I knew that if I wanted to protect my daughter, I had to play my moves carefully. That night, sitting in the dim room with only the sound of my baby's breathing, I whispered, I promise no one will ever take you from me. Caroline thinks she controls everything, but this diary, this is what will bring her down. Something strange rose inside me, fear and strength entwined. I was no longer just Mia, the powerless daughter-in-law. I was a mother, and I would use everything I had to fight for my child. After that night, reading Caroline's diary, I never slept soundly again. Every time I looked at my baby girl in her crib, my heart twisted. I knew if I didn't act, the day would come when I'd lose her to that ruthless woman. Caroline was too confident in her power and money, never imagining that her secret book would become the blade pointed back at her. I began planning. First, I quietly photographed the entire diary, page by page. I stored a copy on my phone, then transferred it to a small USB hidden inside my daughter's baby supplies, somewhere Caroline would never touch. Then I started collecting more evidence. Each time Caroline left papers behind in the living room, I noted down company names, account numbers, even shareholder lists. I moved carefully, pretending to remain the obedient daughter-in-law, showing no hint of suspicion. Once, Caroline walked in while I was looking at a photocopied document. My heart pounded, cold sweat dripping down my back. But I quickly said, Mom, I'm just trying to get ideas for a baby journal. Seeing so many words makes me sleepy. Caroline smirked with disdain. Fine. As long as you don't mess with this family's affairs. I exhaled in relief when she left, silently telling myself I had to move faster. The next step was finding a lawyer. One morning, I pretended to take the baby for a checkup, but instead went to a private law office outside Charlotte. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, in his early 50s, was known for winning custody battles in messy divorces. I showed him the diary copies and told him everything. He frowned, slowly flipping through the pages, then said, "Mia, you're sitting on a ticking time bomb. If this is true, Caroline isn't just planning to take your child, she's tied up in serious financial violations. But you need to be ready. Once this goes to court, they'll fight with everything they have." I clenched my fists and answered, "I'm not afraid. I just want to protect my daughter." After that meeting, I began contacting authorities. I anonymously sent documents of Caroline's shady transactions to the IRS. I also wrote to a financial investigative journalist in New York, attaching some diary images. I wasn't foolish enough to reveal everything at once. I released just enough to spark interest, saving the most damaging evidence for the decisive moment. Meanwhile, I continued playing the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law. Caroline had no idea that every smile I gave her was a mask hiding the fire of fury. The more she bragged to her friends that I was finally listening, the more I forced a polite grin, silently counting down the days to her downfall. One evening, Ethan came home late, looking worn out. I set dinner on the table, pretending to care. "Rough day?" he sighed. "Mom says the company's under scrutiny lately. Maybe someone's leaking information." I hid the flicker of worry in my eyes and replied evenly, "Probably just coincidence. Big companies get audited all the time." Ethan nodded, never suspecting me. As weeks passed, I could see Caroline letting her guard down. She busied herself with lavish parties, showing off my daughter to the whole town, boasting that the Campbells were the model of wealth and unity. She had no clue those very parties would soon be the backdrop when the truth surfaced. One June afternoon, while pushing my daughter's stroller in the park, I called Harris. "I'm ready. When can we officially file?" His voice was steady. "Be patient a little longer. Once the IRS and the journalist move, that's when we strike." With pressure coming from both sides, Caroline won't have time to react. I looked at my baby sleeping peacefully, whispering, "Sweetheart, it's almost time." In the following days, I tightened the case file. Every copied document, every note I organized meticulously, dividing them into sets and hiding them in different places. I knew Caroline was cunning, she could suspect anything. But this time, I wouldn't leave a single crack. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just about my marriage to Ethan, nor simply a clash between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. This was a fight for survival, a battle to secure my right to be a mother. A small smile tugged at my lips. The counterattack was already in motion, and once the wheels turned, nothing could stop them. On Natalie's wedding day, Ethan's younger sister Caroline staged it as if it were the grandest event in all of Charlotte. The Campbell mansion glittered with lights, luxury cars lined up at the gate, and an orchestra played endless symphonies. Caroline swept through in a pearl silk gown, radiating confidence as if the whole party were her stage to flaunt power. I arrived in a simple dress, my baby in my arms, strangely calm. Tonight, their theater of lies would end. All evening, Caroline boasted to guests about the unbreakable bond of the Campbell family. She paraded my baby, introducing herself as the most devoted grandmother. Ethan walked beside her, oblivious that in a few hours, everything they gloried in would collapse. The moment came as the main dinner began. I handed my daughter to Ruby, the nurse, who had helped during my difficult labor, then stepped onto the stage where Natalie and her groom were raising their glasses. The music hushed, hundreds of eyes fixed on me. I drew a deep breath, my voice ringing out. "Sorry to interrupt, but I can't stay silent any longer. I am Mia Campbell, Ethan's legal wife, and the mother of the child you just saw. But I am also the victim of manipulation, lies, and even crimes within this family. Gasps rippled through the hall. Caroline shot up, her face paling. Mia, what are you doing? This is Natalie's wedding. I met her eyes squarely, calmly, pulling a folder from my bag. In my hands are copies of your diary, Caroline Campbell's own words. Here are your plans to strip me of custody, to use my daughter as a tool for control, and records of your financial crimes hidden for years. The big screen, meant for Natalie's wedding slideshow, suddenly lit up with the images I had prepared, page after page of Caroline's neat handwriting, each cold phrase like a blade. A voice read aloud her own lines. Mia is too weak, easily isolated. If needed, I can fabricate evidence to prove she's unfit as a mother. The crowd froze. Some guests covered their mouths, others raised phones to record. Natalie trembled, her groom pale with shock. Ethan rushed forward, his voice sharp. Mia, stop, you've gone insane. I turned to him, my gaze steady. Insane? Or finally brave enough to stop being crushed by this family? Ethan, the night I begged in the freezing rain, you locked the door with your mother and left me and our baby to suffer. Everyone here deserves to know who you really are. Caroline lunged to snatch the folder, but at that instant, two plainclothes officers stepped into the hall. They held out a warrant, their voices firm. Caroline Campbell, you are under arrest for suspected financial fraud, tax evasion, and obstruction of legal parental rights. The hall erupted. Guests gasped. Cameras flashed. Caroline went pale, thrashing, screaming. Everything I did was for this family, for the Campbell name. But her cries were drowned out by the metallic snap of handcuffs. Ethan stood frozen. I walked up and placed an envelope before him. This is the divorce petition, along with all evidence submitted to the court. I am demanding full custody. You and your mother have proven you are unfit to protect our daughter. Ethan's hands shook as he opened it, horror in his eyes. Bank statements, shady emails with accountants all bearing his signature. He stammered, Mia, you've been spying on me? I raised my chin. No, Ethan, you exposed yourself. I just chose the right moment. The guest turned to Ethan with contempt. The empire Caroline had built over decades crumbled in the middle of her daughter's wedding. Natalie burst into tears, her groom dragging her out, desperate to escape the chaos. Back on stage, I spoke firmly, my voice carrying. Some of you may be shocked by this scene. But here is the truth. No one has the right to destroy a woman's life just to feed their own hunger for power. I am not here to ruin a wedding, I am here to expose what hides behind these glittering lights. As Caroline was led away, Ethan collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. The entire hall fell silent, no applause, no raised glasses. Natalie's wedding had become the day the Campbell family collapsed. I stepped down, taking my baby back from Ruby. She pressed into my chest, her tiny warmth filling me with strength. I knew then I had reclaimed everything, my dignity, justice, and above all, the unshakable right to be a mother. In that moment, I whispered into her ear, Sweetheart, from today on, we are free. A year after Natalie's wedding turned into a nightmare for the Campbell family. I sat on the wooden porch of my small house outside Asheville, North Carolina, watching my daughter toddle across the sunlit grass. Emma, now nearly 1, was taking her first wobbly steps, her bright eyes full of wonder. I smiled, breathing in the peace I once thought I would never have. The divorce trial had ended months earlier. I was granted full custody, while Ethan was given only limited visitation. Caroline, after her financial crimes were exposed, was serving years in federal prison. The newspapers carried biting headlines, from powerful businesswoman to family manipulator. The reputation she clung to as her lifeline was gone. At first, I feared the public would judge me harshly, but instead women began sending me letters and emails, telling me they found hope in my story. Many wrote that they too had been silenced, controlled, or made invisible in their own homes. I couldn't reply to them all, but I read every word and realized I was not alone. My new life was simple but deeply meaningful. Each morning, I rose early to prepare breakfast, then took Emma to the backyard where I tended tomatoes, strawberries, and rows of sunflowers. I worked from home, writing for a small women's health magazine. The income wasn't high, but it was enough for the two of us to live comfortably. Most importantly, in this home, Emma and I had equal voices. When she babbled her first words, I listened as if they were treasures. When she pointed at flowers or sparrows, I answered with patience and unconditional love. What Caroline never gave her own children, I vowed to give my daughter in full. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I received a letter from federal prison. It was from Caroline. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were a few shaky lines. Mia, I lost. But maybe losing to you was good. Raise Emma differently from me. Teach her that love is not control. That's the only thing I can leave behind. I folded the letter, neither angry nor forgiving. It was simply an ending. Ethan had all but disappeared after the trial. Fired from his job, stripped of inheritance, he lived quietly in another town. Occasionally, he sent Emma gifts, a picture book, a doll. I didn't stop him, but I wouldn't allow the past to dictate our future. Emma would learn the truth when she was old enough, but until then, she only needed to know she was loved. One morning, as Emma toddled into my arms, her tiny hands wrapped around my neck, I felt a vow form in my heart. You will grow up in a different world, a world where your laughter isn't silenced by anyone's commands, a world where you have the right to choose your own life. I remembered that freezing night, doubled over in labor at the locked door, watching through the glass as my husband and his mother sat calmly at the table. That moment had once been the deepest wound, but now it was only a reminder that I had survived. I had endured, and from their cruelty I was reborn stronger, steadier. They say the sweetest revenge is to live happily. I no longer cared about their suffering. Caroline's downfall and Ethan's losses were proof enough of their mistakes. What I cared about now was giving my daughter a different legacy: freedom, respect, and unconditional love. By evening, the golden sunset spilled across the porch. Emma sat in my lap, scribbling with a crayon in a little notebook. She looked up and whispered, "Mama, our house is so pretty." I hugged her tightly, tears slipping down, but my heart lighter than ever. Yes, this was our home, a place no one could take, where every day began in freedom and ended in peace. Mia's story is not just a family tragedy, but a reflection of what many women face in real life: being controlled, belittled, and stripped of their voice in their own lives. Yet from that pain, Mia rose, turning loss into strength, choosing love and freedom as the foundation to raise her child. In reality, this lesson remains true. Real happiness doesn't come from blind submission, but from setting boundaries, protecting yourself, and giving unconditional love. What do you think about Mia's journey from a controlled wife to a strong mother who reclaimed freedom for herself and her daughter? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories.